smooth, from oceans to airwaves, you know what I mean. Saddle up for the midnight rodeo. Once again, I find myself in the studio, midnight here in London town, and joining me tonight, or today for him, is Broadway and West End star, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying, international glamourpuss, Hayden Tee.
Oh, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. It is so nice to have someone so distinguished here in the Black and White studio. You are joining me today from your own little studio in New Zealand. How are things over in beautiful NZ?
Oh, NZ's lovely. Thank you for asking. It's beautiful here. We're in the middle of winter, of course. We're not in summer like you are over in London, but we're doing well. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I'm in a village of 800 people in my grandmother's abandoned house, and I feel quite isolated in a nice way. How's London?
London's not bad. I tell you what, since I've been here, I seem to have brought the beautiful weather from Barbados when I arrived a few months ago. All in all, it has been absolutely stunning.
Barbados in London.
Yeah, Barbados in London. It doesn't happen very often, but as I said, I seem to be striking gold at the moment. You mentioned you're in a village of 800 people. You're usually in theatres that hold more than 800 people. How's it been to be in a little quiet part of the world?
This is where I grew up. This is where I come from originally. So although it's a little bit of a change of scene, it's actually still definitely home, and still I'm actually more comfortable in a small town like this, to be honest. Cities I find a little overwhelming at times. So as I say, it's like coming home, not just literally, but emotionally and spiritually.
Well, certainly we're at a stage in our lives, all of us at the moment, where we are resetting and figuring things out. And we're going to go into that a little bit later on. But I thought, because we are thespians, and thespians, we all love a bit of a gossip, and musical theatre particularly, which is something that I know both you and I work in, it's in a bit of a state at the moment. I'm sure you will agree. Well, I heard a rumour yesterday that Phantom of the Opera in London at Her Majesty's Theatre perhaps won't reopen the original production once COVID restrictions are over. And I know you have been someone that has worked with Cameron Mackintosh and his productions. You've specifically worked in both the original production of Les Mis and the 25th anniversary production. I wanted to get your thoughts on these historic productions like Les Mis and Phantom, and updating these historically significant productions. What do you think about things like that?
Look, I'm not quite sure exactly what the official word is on Phantom, but I have read Cameron's official statement saying he's not opening his shows till 2021. And I think that seems to be the general consensus for the West End at the moment, which is heartbreaking. I hope they can get things back up as fast as possible. In terms of replacing productions and things like that, I mean, the original Phantom production is iconic, and I'm not sure what the plan is there, whether they're going to bring the new version in that Cameron started out on the tour, directed by Lawrence, a few years ago. I have not seen that, actually, so I don't feel I can comment as such. But it's a weird thing. I think with the Les Mis production changing over to the new version, I mean, I love the new version myself. I obviously spent a lot of time in both different versions. I love the old, I love the Revolve, but I think the new version takes it into a new area. It's a controversial topic because obviously the original directors are now not getting the rights and stuff, and that has been discussed far and wide online. Like, everyone has a different opinion about that, but I think it's a complicated one, and I see both sides. I just think as long as theatre can survive in some way, and if there's a way that can make that live on for longer for more people, then I guess it's a good thing. What do you think?
It's tough, you know. I am especially a Phantom purist, and to see, if it goes this way, to see the original production of Phantom that opened in 1986 with Michael Crawford, Sarah Brightman, would be such a shame, because the technology, especially in that show, still stands up to most productions on the West End now. And to see the updated version, which is great, and I've watched that as well, to see it go away after such a historic run, it would be sad. And I know there's a lot of purists out there that would obviously disagree with that. However, to your point, we need to make theatre survive and to be sustainable. So if bringing the new production in is a cheaper alternative and gets it back on stage quicker, then perhaps that is the route we should go. There is no right way to handle what is an unprecedented situation. And as long as those shows remain in the West End, that's probably the best way to go.
It is. But saying that, and I don't know officially if it has been pulled or not, but I feel for all those people in work there. I have a lot of friends in that particular company in varying degrees, whether it be front of house, playing the Phantom himself and Piangi himself and Raoul himself, or, you know, other people in the show, or people and costume people. A lot of my friends are in that building, and that breaks my heart. To think that they may have lost their jobs, you know, the entire industry all over the world is struggling right now. This is unprecedented what we're going through. I still wake up sometimes and I'm like, hold on, what's happened? Thinking back to February, I could not have imagined that this is the reality that we could be living in right now. Is this the new normal? It's scary times, and that's who I feel for the most, those people who have potentially lost their jobs. Because that's just not fair.
Well, it's safe to say all creatives are in a state of uncertainty right now. You and I were in the midst of contracts, jobs. You yourself were in the Philippines working on Matilda. I was on the ocean being a pirate, as I am. And then all of a sudden, the rug gets pulled out and we find ourselves unemployed to some degree. We found ourselves working on different things and certainly not having a 2020 that probably the book looked like when we wrote it at the beginning of the year. But this leads me to the next point that I wanted to touch on with you, because you are not only well known as a performer, but you were also renowned for your work in makeup as well. And you've certainly garnered a lot of attention for the videos that you put out with your makeup. And it's become kind of one of your signatures of your on-stage persona, I suppose, the fact that you do your own makeup and are able to teach makeup as well. And I know that's something that you've been doing because of this lockdown and the fact that there are no stages to perform on. So tell us a little bit about your backup, which is as a makeup artist.
Yeah, sure. I've been a makeup artist for years. When I was going through drama school in Sydney and back in, I'm aging myself here, 1999. I moved from New Zealand to Australia at the age of 18 to go to drama school and needed to survive. So I picked up a little job working on the Clinique counter and realized I kind of, in those days, found a skill for putting on makeup with users cotton tips. Anyway, I ended up working for MAC and then becoming a professional makeup artist. Makeup kind of always lived alongside my performing. I loved it because in between jobs, particularly early on, but even still now, I could go and get a job on a counter or selling makeup somewhere and that would be a great backup. But the most important thing was that I still used it within my performing career. It was something that kind of added to my ability within my performing career. I could become a bit of a chameleon and transform myself. I don't know, I guess it's another form of escapism, really. But makeup has saved me. It saved me financially at different times throughout my career, including now. And also kind of emotionally, I get very anxious. I'm an anxious person. And whenever I do a makeup, all that anxiety just melts away. It's a real therapy for me, to be honest. So it's kind of the perfect thing to be now going back to, both to get some financial security, but also to kind of calm any anxiety that I have through this entire period, which I have to say hasn't been much. My anxiety has disappeared for some reason. I guess I'm meant to be in isolation.
It's funny you say that, and I will agree with you there, because for me, it's different. It's not so much anxiety with me, but certainly I become incredibly disgruntled when I don't have a creative purpose. And I think I've dealt with a lot of people during this situation, and I think a lot of us are just throwing up our hands and just going, you know what, this is no one's fault. No one expected this. There's nothing we can do about it. We've just got to make it work. This is the hand we have been dealt for right now, and there's no point in pissing and moaning about it. It's just something that we have to roll with the punches, and we are finding ourselves creating new opportunities for ourselves, and that's something I certainly want to talk to you a little bit more about later. And you mentioned about being a chameleon, and you are known for big, boisterous characters, and in just a moment, we're going to pick up our conversation with a little bit of a chat about character acting and your process.
You're listening to the Midnight Rodeo with Thomas Armstrong-Robley.
Where we left our chat, we were talking about makeup and how it provides escapism, and also how important it is to have a backup in an incredibly uncertain industry, especially in 2020. But before we go back to that chat about the importance of backup plans, I want to talk about some of the characters you've played and these big, boisterous roles, and a little bit about your process and how you get into them. I mean, for me, I've seen you as Javert in the West End. I also saw you as Miss Trunchball in Matilda. Talk about your process and how you approach playing these huge character roles.
It's different depending on the character, but it's also, I do have, I don't want to say a streamlined process because the creative process is never really streamlined, but I do have a way that I kind of find I get into them. And the first part of that is finding the things that I have in common with them. I tend to, rather than putting a character on, although they seem often very extreme, I generally tend to remove different characteristics of Hayden to reveal something that we both share. I try to always make things come from a truthful place that is rooted in me. Therefore, I feel like they hopefully they come across a bit more authentic. I don't know. But that's where I try and figure out what I have in common with the character. With someone like Javert, it was absolutely the OCD, and the thing with Trunch was also her need for control, her need to have a control of a situation, which I tend to be like that in real life as well. So that's kind of how I start off by getting into the characters, and then everything else just kind of piles on throughout the process. We're going to get technical. I use a bit of Stanislavski, I use a bit of Laban, I use a little bit of Meisner. But to be honest, all of that homework and process at the beginning falls away when you're on stage and you're just left with the thoughts that you've landed with throughout the process, if that makes sense.
And this is something I continue to repeat on this show. There is no right path in any part of this industry. One thing that I'm curious to hear about, because this is something that I have, I suppose, struggled with over the year, is the idea of a emotional switch. And I find myself playing, similar to you, these dark, often villainous or quite complicated mental characters that can take quite an emotional toll on you, and sometimes a physical toll on you as well. And I feel there is an importance to have an emotional switch so you know, okay, as soon as I come off stage, I'm no longer that character, because a lot of actors, especially those with a bit of a method-based ideology, can take those characters home, and it can be quite damaging. We've seen actors, specifically famous actors, do a lot of damage to themselves over the years. Do you think there's an importance to have that emotional switch? Yeah,
there is. I do suffer from what they call a character hangover, where, not that I become the character. I'm not Yul Brynner. I don't go home and pretend I'm the king and the king and I still. But, I'm not walking the streets searching for ex-convicts and throwing children around by their pigtails in my day-to-day life. But I think it's probably partly because of my process. The things that I do have in common with the character tend to become a little heightened in my life. After about a year and a half, 2 years of playing Javert, I started to find it very hard to just shake his energy, not just after I left the theatre, but sometimes as myself backstage. I would be policing things. It never got really out of hand, but I don't know, maybe some people in the company would say differently. But a year and a half into the run, I was like, I think I need to maybe talk to someone about this, but I just would love to be able to, as they identify that switch so I can turn it off. And the amazing thing about Australia is if you go to a doctor and you say, hi, I have to kill myself 8 times a week, have been doing so for a year and a half and going to be doing so at the moment for the next 2 years at least, can you help me? They are really quick to go, yeah, please let me sort out some free therapy sessions for you. So I went to see someone in Brisbane, and it was actually a real breakthrough, not just for that role, but for me in general, and I still use it today. They suggested creating anything sensory. So what I landed with is a fragrance. So I have a fragrance that I very firmly associate with myself. At some point throughout the creative process, before we get to opening night, I choose a fragrance for the character. And what that does is it really is about at the end of the night. I put it on obviously at the beginning after I've done my makeup, before I get my costume on, and that kind of helps me get into character. But it's really at the end of the night, I can wash that scent and that character away and then spray a scent that I associate with myself on. And that really helps me out of it. So I now, for the roles I've played since, I have a fragrance attached to it. Pretty funny. It also means if I meet one that wears that fragrance, it can be a little triggering at times. I'm like, oh, interesting.
Okay, then. This has sent me off in another direction, but I am very curious because I had heard about this particular process that you had with the fragrances. I'm curious. Tell me some of your greatest hits in terms of the fragrances of your characters. I'm interested.
Well, Trunch is Tuscan Leather by Tom Ford. She's a bougie bitch, apparently. She can afford the expensive stuff. I'll tell you the reason why I chose it, though, is because it smells like leather, and which is very her. She wears leather, she has leather gloves, she's very sporty, she's, Olympian shot put, hammer throwing, so the leather scent really helps. Javert is Egoist by Chanel, which, to be honest, I chose because my first ever partner when I was 18, 19 wore it, and it still triggers me to this day. It makes me a little angry, so I was like, I'm going to go with that one. And Egoist. Javert is all about ego. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't let go of this obsession with those on kind of until he really has to, because he just can't quite accept the fact that he's wrong. He's quite self-righteous. So Egoist, it felt right. Now I don't associate it with that at all, but I definitely associate it with Javert now. But yeah, that's his fragrance. And my fragrance is Tom Ford Black Orchid. And that's definitely, I feel like myself when I put that on. I've been wearing that for quite a few years. That's my switch off.
There you go. It's one of my curious ideas. I know some people start with the shoes and some people apparently start with the sprays, which is fantastic. a lot of budding musical theatre performers out there, and no doubt fans of musical theatre as well. You have had an incredible career on the stage as an actor and a singer. You have done what many aspiring performers would hope to do one day, and that is perform on both the West End and on Broadway. I had a question from a listener of mine that came in that asked, Broadway versus the West End. Is there a difference? What do you prefer? Tell me a little bit about your experiences working between those two theatre hubs, no doubt the two most famous theatre districts in the world.
Yeah, they are very different, but at the same time, they're the same. I think the important thing to realise is theatre, no matter where it is in the world, no matter what production who was involved, and even no matter who the audience is really, because that's essentially what it's all about, is who you're performing for, is the same. It is still that family, it is still that sense of community, it is still that collection of misfits who grew up not quite knowing where they would fit in, and they managed to find a place where their differences were celebrated rather than ostracized. And that formative base of what theatre is the same everywhere. And that is the reason why I, to this day, still love performing and doing what I do. That is the same everywhere. And to be honest, I don't have a preference. Everyone always says, oh, where would you prefer to work? Where would you prefer to live? And I think the reason why I've jumped around so many countries, particularly in the last, well, my entire career really, but particularly the last 10 years, has been year contracts in different countries, pretty much alternating, is because I don't really mind where I am. It's about what I'm doing. If I'm working, I'm happy. I'm just as happy doing 8 shows a week in New York as I am in London, as I am in Auckland, as I am in Melbourne, as I am in South Korea and Seoul, or Manila. It's really not about where I am, it's about what I'm doing. And if I'm working, I'm happy. Saying that, there are some huge differences between Broadway and the West End, just on a functional level, logistics-wise. For instance, equity is so strong in America, much stronger than it is in the UK. So for that reason, there are a lot more restrictions put in place in terms of what the producers can ask of you. They can't call you any time before the half hour. So you're responsible for your own warm-up, your own physical warm-up, and your own vocal warm-up. So you can get to the theatre and never see anyone. So another thing that's different about when in London, it's generally an hour call. Matilda in London was an hour and 45 minutes. They could never really do that without having to pay extra loadings in New York because the equity is so strong. What that means is because you don't have a company warm-up together, I love that family feeling, like I say, of being in a show, and we're a family of misfits putting this story on for the people out there in the audience. And because we don't have a warm-up together in New York, in America, you kind of miss that feeling of arriving at the theatre each day, looking around, seeing how everyone's feeling. Oh, that person seems a little low in energy today, so I might kind of give them a little bit of my energy. Or, oh, I'm feeling a little under today. That person over there is like bouncing with surplus energy. I might, lean on that a little bit tonight and get inspired by that. There isn't that sort of aspect in America as much, just because you don't have that communal warm-up time before a show. Another thing that's different is they have a thing called a vacational swing, which is actually wonderful. America has amazing respect for swings. Swings are the hardest job in a show. They cover all of the ensemble, multiple tracks, 6 to 12 tracks normally in a show that they cover. They have to know. I do not have the brain for it. They are the hardest working people in the industry, and I have mad respect for what they do. And America does treat them with much more respect than some other countries do, which is wonderful. In America, they have a thing called a vacation swing. Like there are swings who vacation swing on like 4 shows at once. I've got a friend who would be at Les Mis and then run over to Beautiful and then run over to Aladdin. And he'd have like 2 or 4 weeks at a time booked at each show. And imagine knowing 6 tracks for 4 different shows all at once. I mean, it's a huge job. But because there's no warm-up together in a company, I'm there, for instance, doing Les Mis, playing Javert, where the entire first act, I walk on stage and all the ensemble run away from me. It's the setting up his status throughout Act 1. And then Act 2, he gets tied up on the barricade. And I'm sitting there on the barricade getting tied up by someone I've never seen or met before, because their vacation swing has just turned up today to relieve someone. And we didn't have a company warm-up today. And I didn't realize that this happened in New York. So I didn't look at the list and recognize a name I didn't recognize. So I'm literally going, who is this person I've never, ever laid my eyes on before? And we're in Act 2 of a Broadway show, and you tie me up. Sure. So that's different to the West End. So I think that's essentially exactly the same, but there are just a couple of functional running differences like that, generally based around the strength of the equity of the union. That's the main difference. But you know what? I am just as happy to do a show in Poughkeepsie as I am on Broadway.
That's the thing. We have to remain flexible. I think 2020 has taught us we need to remain flexible, and we can't afford to be too picky with where we work, because there is so much competition and the jobs, especially at the moment, are very slim pickings.
But I mean, yes, that's very relevant during COVID, but even before COVID, I feel like that. Like, I haven't had the career I've had because obviously I had goals. I wanted to be West End, I wanted to be Broadway, but I didn't necessarily go and get visas and green cards and to work in those places because I thought, I want to be a lead role on Broadway. To me, in my mind, the only thing that really truly makes me happy is performing. So I have to do all I can to make sure that I have more chances of getting work performing. So I'm happy. The more countries I can work in, the better off I'm going to be. I've got 3 more chances of getting a job. It's really less about, I want to work there, I want to live there, I want to have that life. It's more about, I come from a small town in New Zealand. I set up my life so I have more options of working. And I literally spend most of my time, I'll come back to New Zealand after a job. I did after Les Mis, I did after Matilda. Stay here for 6 months. I'd rather be here in New Zealand living in a tiny house in the middle of nowhere, rent-free, and then sending videos to places and spend the money on a business class flight to fly in for a final audition and then move there than I would basing myself in one place, limiting myself and my opportunities. It's less of a wanting to have a career, more of a just wanting to be on a stage somewhere.
You're right there, mate. And I hope a lot of young performers and a lot of future performers listen to this, because there is a lot of, as I said, uncertainty in our industry. And I think quite a bit of hopelessness out there at the moment, simply because the industry is in a shutdown. And as someone that has had success and continues to succeed in various aspects of the industry, I wonder if you could use your, I suppose, hindsight to give advice to those young performers.
Sure. I think during a really uncertain time like COVID right now, obviously, and I am very, very, very aware that it is not just our industry that is suffering, because, of course, a lot of our particular friends are in the arts. We hear a lot about that, and we have been. We were one of the first to close, and we will be one of the last to open. And I do understand that, but there's the travel industry, there is the aviation industry. There are lots of industries that are struggling right now, and it's very important to keep perspective on that. It's not just us. And the even bigger perspective is people have died out of this. We're still alive. We have to be very grateful for the fact that we're still around. I think performers in general, not just performers, creatives, people within the arts in general, are very used to, we're all freelancers, we're used to having jobs drop in and out. We're used to, in between jobs, having to have that hustle. We're not in an industry where we get a job and you move up within a company for 6 to 10 years and then become a CEO, a partner, and then retire. That trajectory doesn't really happen in our world. We're used to going from job to job and having breaks in between. So if anything, we're actually emotionally equipped to deal with the need to go on hustle again, which is what we're all doing right now. We're all getting the hustle on, whether it be creatively hustling to express ourselves, because that's what we need to do emotionally, or whether it be financially hustling and getting projects out there and doing lots of jobs to financially survive. We do have an advantage because we're used to dropping in and out of the hustle. So we're all just in major hustle mode right now. I think that's important, but whatever skills that we're using right now to survive and hustle are things that are going to ensure that we have longevity in this industry and just in general, I think, because we don't know when things are going to start up again. But I think the ones who will not only survive but thrive within this new normal, whatever that is and whatever that will be, are the ones who don't sit around and wait for things to return to the way they were, the ones who innovate, evolve, learn, grow, come up with new creative ideas to survive in the new normal, to survive in this present day. They're the ones who are going to really thrive and come out of this better off than they were when they came into it. I think that's really important, to use that inherent sense of hustle that artists have to adapt to thrive within these new conditions. I think that's vital.
You're so right. This is a process of evolution. And you made a great point before about returning to normality and what is normal. To me, it's paradoxical. It's like the concept of perfection. It doesn't exist. We are in a stage of evolution right now, and those people that don't sit by and watch the world go on, and those that adapt, they will be the ones that thrive, and they will always be the ones that end up with the jobs at the end of this.
100%, I think. And should. The innovators.
Absolutely. This is a challenging time, as you mentioned, for everyone. I know you have your sister that works in healthcare, and certainly they have been challenged and certainly a lot more pressurized than anybody that I could possibly imagine. Our industry, we have vested interest in the arts, and we believe that our industry is vital, and I think it is. 100%. However, unfortunately, as you mentioned, theatre and the arts will be one of the last things to come back because it is a first world need.
Yeah, so it's vital, but it's not an essential service in terms of survival. And yeah, come at me, attack me for saying that. I understand. I'm an artist. I want all of that to exist, and it will because of the innovation and the hustle. But I'm just very, very aware that because we are taught in our training to project, that sometimes we have the loudest voice. And as much as we have to keep the arts in focus, which we absolutely do, we have to use that voice too to help others that are like my sister and I see Eunice, going there into the front line every day. And although New Zealand has been very lucky and it actually hasn't been as bad as it could have been by any stretch, they're the people who are out there putting themselves in danger in terms of the virus in the front lines working for all of us right now. They're the ones keeping people alive. So when things not return to normal, but when things settle and what the new normal will be, that we have an audience to watch because of those people.
We do need to use our voices to spread positivity. I think that is one of the key ingredients in the success of the future right now, is using our voices, our, as you mentioned, incredibly loud voices for causes that matter. That is something that I know you will continue to do. I hope to be able to do through this new platform that I have found myself working in. And I think together, you and I and all of our fellow brothers and sisters in the arts and all mankind, if they choose to use their voices in correct ways, we can fix this. And we certainly can hopefully come out of this difficult situation, perhaps in an even stronger position than we were when we went into it.
I think so. I think it's, everyone's talking about returning to the normal. What if we can make a better normal? We've got a chance right now where everything has literally been put in a pot and boiled down to liquid again. What if we pour it into a new mold, a new, better functioning for everyone mold? It's a real chance to reset and restart in the better foundations right now. And I trust that we will. Majority will come out of it in that mindset.
I couldn't agree with you more, mate. And I thank you for taking the time out of your day today to use that voice, to chat to me, to spread those messages, to encourage those young artists, and to have a little bit of gossip as well. Hayden, it has been a great joy catching up with you, and I wish you nothing but the best in your 800-person village.
Thank you so much for having me, mate. And take care. Give London my love.
I will.